He was just an old veteran sleeping outside a store, but that night he was waiting for something. Winter bit into the nights of the small town of Burnwood. Wind sliced through the alleyways between shuttered shops, brushing against the thin, frail frame of Tom Reynolds as he sat motionless in front of the bakery. His military jacket was worn and faded. Beside him lay an old backpack containing all his possessions: a small radio, a water bottle, a notebook, and a backup pair of shoes with soles falling apart. It had been nearly 3 months since Tom started sleeping there. During the day, he wandered to the park, sitting under the sun, sometimes collecting cigarette butts, sometimes staring off as if trying to remember something lost. But every night, he returned to the same spot, the bakery, its dim neon sign, and the faint smell of flour drifting out to the gaps in the door. People began to notice him. Most just glanced and walked on. Some shopkeepers started to complain. They said he ruined the view, scared customers, or made the street look unsafe. Tom remained calm. He never begged, never disturbed anyone. But each night, he sat in the same position, back against the brick wall, eyes scanning the street, ears sharpening whenever a car engine stopped or hurried footsteps passed by. No one knew what he was really listening for. One night, a bakery employee stepped outside with leftover bread. A young trainee, maybe out of pity or just discomfort from seeing the old man freezing under the pale lights. Tom accepted the bread, but it wasn't the food that caught his attention. As the worker stepped back in, the door didn't close all the way. Tom glanced inside. His eyes weren't drawn to the pastries or the counter, but to the far wall where a faint shadow moved. Just a flicker, barely there. But it was enough. He quietly scribbled a note in his small notebook, 1:42 a.m. The next morning, when the bakery reopened, one employee complained that the security camera had glitched for a few minutes during the night. They chalked it up to a technical fault. Tom didn't. That night, he didn't sleep outside the bakery. He moved across the street. From there, he could see the entire block. The street lamp flickered from an old electrical fault. Tom sat on a bench, hiding his body in the shadows. From inside his jacket, he pulled something out, a small hand-drawn map of the block and a blue pen. He began marking lines, vehicle paths, escape routes, movement between shops. At the bottom of the page, he circled something in red ink: primary target, electronics store, 3 nights. He had warned them once, but no one cared. To them, he was just an old man with stories no one believed. 2 nights after the shadow in the bakery, Tom moved his sleeping spot again, this time in front of the old toy store, right next to the electronics shop. The security light above flickered, then went dark completely, as it often did in that neglected alley. Tom took note. That made 3 security blind spots on the block. He drew a bold red X in his notebook. The next morning, as the shops opened, Tom was approached by a store clerk from across the street, a young man with gelled hair and a clipboard in his hand. He didn't even try to hide his disgust. "You can't keep loitering here. Customers are uncomfortable." Tom nodded slowly. He didn't argue, just packed his things and walked toward the bus bench down the street. But he never left the area. The clerk smirked and shook his head, then turned to a nearby police patrol, who happened to be parked at the corner. He pointed at Tom. The officer stepped out and called him over. "Sir, we've had a few complaints. Have you been sleeping out here every night?" "Yes," Tom answered plainly. The officer looked at him closely. "Have you seen anything unusual? Any suspicious behavior?" Tom's eyes met the officer's, steady and calm. "Yes," he said. "There was a test run 2 nights ago, inside the bakery. Whoever it was, they were checking timing. No tools, just presence. Tonight or tomorrow, they'll come back, but it won't be a test." The officer's expression changed slightly, but only for a second. Then it turned to amusement. "I see. And you know this how?" Tom didn't answer. Instead, he handed over his notebook. The officer flipped through a few pages filled with hand-drawn maps, timestamps, observations of vehicles, even a sketch of a white van with a dented back door. "Just keep an eye open," Tom said as he slowly turned and walked away. The officer glanced at the notes, then at the retreating figure. Something in him hesitated. But when he returned to his car, his partner laughed it off. "You're going to follow hobo Sherlock Holmes now." And so the notebook sat on the dashboard, unread. That evening, Lena, the night shift cashier at the 24-hour mini-mart, noticed Tom outside again, this time positioned across the electronics store. She had seen him before, always quiet, always sitting like a statue, listening. But tonight, she did something she'd never done before. She brought him coffee. Tom accepted it with a nod. "You're always here," she said softly, awkward. "People talk, but I don't know, you don't seem crazy." Tom chuckled quietly. Crazy's not the worst thing to be called. There was a long pause. Lena looked toward the dark glass of the electronics store. "You watching something?" Tom didn't answer directly. 3 nights ago, a van drove past 3 times. Same route, same time, no plates. This block has 3 cameras down and 2 dead zones. If I were younger, I'd hide on that roof, he pointed with his chin, and drop in through the skylight. 15 seconds to breach. 30 more to clear shelves. Lena's face shifted. "You sound like you've done that before." "I've stopped people who did." The cold wind returned, cutting through their coats. But Lena stayed a moment longer. Her eyes followed his gaze toward the darkened alley near the electronics store. Tom took a slow sip of coffee. "Tonight's not the night," he muttered. "But soon." The 4th night came. Quiet. Too quiet. It was 1:37 a.m. when the van appeared. Lena saw it first, while wiping the convenience store counter for the 3rd time that hour. The same white van. No logo. No plates. Slid slowly past the storefronts like a predator stalking its prey. She stepped outside. Tom was already standing. Not sitting. Standing. The van didn't stop. It circled the block once, twice, then disappeared into the shadows behind a hardware store. Tom whispered without turning his head, "Tonight's the night." Lena's heart thudded. "Should I call the cops?" "They won't come fast enough," Tom said. "But I've got something they'll want to see." From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small device, something that looked like a car key fob, but with wires poking out the back. Lena frowned. "What is that?" "Old trick from an old life," he muttered. "Deterrence. Non-lethal." At exactly 2:13 a.m., the van returned. This time it parked. Headlights off. The engine died. 4 men emerged. Black hoodies. Gloves. One carried a small crowbar. Another had a radio earpiece. They moved with purpose. No hesitation. No noise. They knew this block. Knew the patrol schedule. Knew which alarms worked and which didn't. Tom's eyes narrowed. He tapped the fob once. A faint click came from beneath the van. The men didn't notice. They approached the electronics store entrance. One knelt to tamper with the lock. Another scanned the street. One of them pointed at the store's camera, which wasn't blinking, just as expected. But what they didn't expect was a sudden, sharp burst of flashing lights from 3 surrounding buildings. Motion-trigger floodlights activated simultaneously. Tom had rerouted the power lines days ago. In secret, the entire sidewalk lit up like a stage. The men froze. Then, boom, a small smoke device detonated beneath the van. Not enough to hurt anyone, but enough to blind, enough to disorient. One man stumbled and ran toward the alley. Tom was already moving. He grabbed the wooden stick hidden in his sleeping bag and blocked the alley mouth. The man charged him, but Tom sidestepped and swept his legs. The man crashed onto the pavement. The second suspect sprinted the other direction, right into Lena's call to 911, which was still live. The third and fourth bolted back to the van, but blue and red lights had already turned the corner. Someone had been watching. By the time the police arrived, Tom was already sitting again, right back in his usual spot, back against the wall, as if nothing had happened. The officers rushed past him, securing the scene, detaining the 3 stunned suspects they managed to catch. The 4th man, the one Tom had taken down, groaned quietly beside the alley, face down and zip-tied with cable from Tom's backpack. One officer paused and looked down at the old man. "You did this." Tom didn't answer. He simply nodded toward the van. "Check the back compartment." Moments later, officers opened the van's rear doors and found a bag of equipment: glass cutters, electromagnetic jammers, and printed floor maps of the electronics store. One officer whistled low. Lena stood nearby, still holding her phone, her hands trembling, but her eyes were fixed on Tom. "Why?" she asked. Tom looked up at her with tired eyes. "You asked me the wrong question last night," he said. "You asked if I've done this before." She frowned. "So, you should have asked why I still do it." Before anyone could say more, a news van arrived. Someone had tipped off the local station. Reporters swarmed in, flashing cameras and shouting questions. The story had spread fast. Police holding down thieves. Smoke bombs. A homeless man, no, a veteran, was the one who caught them. The store owners arrived in the early morning, confused and panicked, then stunned. The electronics store manager looked at the broken door, the van, the handcuffed criminals on the sidewalk, and finally at Tom, sitting quietly with a cup of cold coffee in his hands. Later that morning, Tom was taken to the station for a formal statement. He didn't ask for anything, not recognition, not payment. He just handed over the notebook. Inside it were 10 pages detailing weeks of surveillance. Timings, routes, drawings, even guesses on the crew's methods based on what tools they carried, and which cameras had gone dark. The chief of police leaned back in his chair, flipping through the notes. "You wrote all this while living on a bench?" Tom nodded. "I've slept in worse places." The chief looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He saw the burn scars on his neck, the military boots, stitched at the toes, the stillness in his posture, not weakness, but restraint. That afternoon, the mayor himself made a statement on the local news. "Thanks to the actions of one vigilant citizen, a major robbery was prevented last night, and it reminds us that sometimes our quietest neighbors are the ones who see the most." Tom wasn't watching the broadcast. He was back at the bench. Same spot, same jacket. But something had changed. This time, as people passed him, they didn't look away. Some nodded, some even smiled. And one little boy walked up, handed him a paper cup of hot cocoa, and said, "My dad says you're a hero." Tom blinked, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. By the next evening, the story had made it beyond Burnwood. Local papers called him the Midnight Hero. Blogs speculated about his past. Old neighbors who hadn't seen Tom in years left comments on articles, claiming they remembered him from his time in uniform. But Tom was still on the street. He sat outside the pharmacy that night, not to watch anything, but simply because he didn't know where else to go. For years, this sidewalk had been the only thing consistent in his life. The cold, the routine, the silence. Then Lena arrived. She didn't bring coffee this time. She brought a man in a clean brown jacket with a clipboard and an ID tag from the local community shelter. The man introduced himself as Kyle. He said he worked with veterans. He'd seen the news and tracked Tom down, not to ask for interviews or put him on some charity flyer, but to offer him a place to stay. Just a room, a warm bed, no catch. Tom hesitated. His fingers gripped the bench tighter. "I'm not used to four walls anymore," he muttered. Kyle didn't pressure him. He simply said, "The door stays open, whether you want to stay one night or longer." Tom nodded once, then slowly rose to his feet. That night, for the first time in years, he slept indoors. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch at the heater noises. But when he placed his backpack down and saw the small bed with a folded towel and fresh socks on top, he sat on the edge for a long while, hands still gripping the straps. The next morning, he took a walk. Not to patrol, not to check shadows, just a walk. But halfway down the block, someone stopped him. It was the manager of the electronics store. "Hey," the man said, holding out a hand awkwardly. "I wanted to say thank you. And, well, I spoke with a few people." Tom raised an eyebrow. "We could use someone like you," the manager continued. "Not just for security. I mean, you see things. You're patient. That's rare." Tom said nothing. The man handed him a card. Operations assistant. Night shift. It's not much, but it's steady. Benefits. and it's yours if you want it. Tom looked at the card, then at the man, then back at the street behind him, his old street, the bench, the lights. He exhaled, and for once, it didn't fog from the cold. Tom didn't answer right away. He kept the card tucked in his pocket as he walked the familiar streets of Burnwood. Only now, people saw him differently. No longer just the silent man by the storefront. No longer invisible. The cafe owner who used to draw her blinds when he was nearby now waved from behind the glass. The mailman stopped his cart just to nod and say, "Thank you, sir." Even the teenager who once mocked him under his breath now avoided eye contact. Tom didn't chase recognition, but it was strange being seen. That night, he returned to the community shelter, the bed still untouched since morning. The folded towel was now warm, left on the radiator by a volunteer who noticed how stiff Tom's shoulders looked. He lay back, eyes open, ceiling dark. His mind wasn't racing. It was watching, replaying old habits, routes, doors, exit points. And then, finally, sleep came. Over the next week, Tom said little, but he watched, and he listened. Kyle from the shelter visited every day, checking in without pressure. Lena dropped off socks and fresh fruit whenever she could. The police chief stopped by with paperwork, some kind of commendation he didn't bother reading. And then came the second offer. It wasn't from the electronics store. It was from City Hall, a quiet meeting. No reporters, just two men in a small office, one desk, a pot of lukewarm coffee. The mayor's assistant explained it gently. The city had a new initiative, Veterans Watch, a community program placing trained veterans as auxiliary night monitors. Not police, not security guards, just eyes and ears. Paid, supported, trusted. We like you to be the first. Tom looked at the file. It had his name on it. Full name, Thomas James Reynolds. He hadn't seen it typed in years. No longer just a ghost. He ran his fingers across the page, as if confirming he was real. "Can I still keep walking the block?" he asked. The assistant smiled. "That's the point." And so, the next night, Tom returned to the streets. Not as a man with nowhere to go, but as someone with a reason to walk. He wore a coat the shelter gave him, fresh boots, and in his pocket, a radio, not a toy, but an official line. The bench was still there. The flickering light above the electronics store still buzzed. But now, the shadows seemed a little thinner, the silence a little warmer. And when a car slowed near the curb that night, unfamiliar, engine humming low, Tom didn't flinch. He simply adjusted his jacket and waited. The unfamiliar car idled too long. Tom stood perfectly still on the sidewalk, eyes narrowing at the rhythm of the engine. He didn't reach for anything. He didn't move, just watched. A moment later, the car slowly pulled away, tires crunching over loose gravel, then disappeared around the corner. False alarm. But Tom had already made a mental note of the license plate, just in case. He resumed walking the block, hands in his coat pockets, boots hitting pavement in a steady rhythm. His body moved with the quiet precision of habit. Each glance, each pause, each shift in breath was deliberate. At 2 a.m., he stopped by the mini-mart. Lena was behind the counter again. She waved as he entered. "You look different," she said. Tom glanced at his coat. "Less holes." She chuckled and handed him a wrapped sandwich. "It's on the house. And they're calling you a hero, you know." He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a folded sheet from his pocket. The same map of the block, now laminated. City provided. It had notes printed in red. High-risk zones, blind spots, shelter safe points, and even an emergency call code. In the corner, typed in small gray font, was a title. Veterans Watch, Area 001, Lead Observer, T.J. Reynolds. Lena's eyes widened. "You're official now." Tom nodded once, still watching. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever feel tired of being on guard all the time?" Tom looked at her, calm and clear. "I spent years learning how to protect something, even when I had nothing." She softened. "And now?" He folded the map again. Now I got something. Outside, the cold wind had picked up, but he didn't shiver, because now he wasn't just protecting the block. He was reclaiming it, one night at a time. It started with a blink, then darkness. At 1:48 a.m., every streetlight on the east side of Burnwood went dark, one after another, like dominoes falling into shadow. The electronics store, the pharmacy, even the mini-mart where Lena worked, swallowed by the black. Generators didn't kick in. No alarm sounded. The silence was wrong. Tom was already moving. He didn't panic. He didn't even rush. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small tactical flashlight. Military issue, red lens, low beam. No glow to the sides. Just a thin, disciplined line of light. He swept it across the sidewalk, then toward the rooftops. Nothing. He crossed the street and entered the alley between the toy store and the bakery. Tight, slick with frost. The kind of place you don't go unless you know the way out. Halfway through, he paused. A sound, not footsteps. A click. He knew that sound. Wire cutter. Tom crouched instantly, turned off the light, and went silent. The breath in his lungs slowed. The air sharpened. Then another click, followed by soft footfall. Tom moved like water. He emerged behind a bakery dumpster just as a figure stepped out with a tool bag. Covered face. Gloves. Tactical shoes, not boots. Not a junkie. Not random. This was professional. The figure turned. Too late. Tom struck fast, his flashlight cracking across the man's wrist. Tools clattered to the ground. The figure tried to run, but Tom hooked his coat sleeve and twisted, slamming him into the brick wall. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The man froze. Moments later, red and blue lights lit up the alley's entrance. Lena had called. Even without power, she had dialed Tom's radio, just in case. And just in case was all he needed. The officers restrained the intruder. In his bag, they found not just tools, but maps. Again, only this time, the targets weren't stores. They were the community shelters. One of them, Tom's. Back at the precinct, the suspect refused to talk. But Tom didn't go to the station. He stood outside the shelter, watching, waiting. And this time, he wasn't alone. Two younger veterans, both part of the new Veterans Watch, flanked him. They didn't speak much either. They just stood, still, ready. And when the lights of Burnwood finally flickered back to life, they were already back in position. The next morning, headlines swept across the state. Veteran stops attempted attack on homeless shelter. Blackout was just a cover, but he was already watching. Midnight hero strikes again. Tom ignored them all. He had never done it for recognition. He didn't need the applause. He didn't even attend the press conference that the mayor hastily organized in front of City Hall. Instead, he returned to the streets as if nothing had happened. The same coat, same steps, same route. But this time, something felt different. At every corner, someone nodded. A shop owner brought him a chair and a thermos of black coffee. A teenager handed him a drawing, a sketch of Tom, standing tall in the alley, flashlight in hand like a soldier back from front lines. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. That evening, just before sundown, Lena found him sitting alone behind the mini-mart. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a patch, dark green, stitched with a gold border. Veterans Watch, Unit 01. Someone thought you should have this, she said. Tom looked at it for a long moment, then placed it in his pocket. I don't wear uniforms anymore, he said. But this one, Lena replied, her voice quiet. You made yourself. That night, as Tom walked his usual route, two other veterans walked with him, one tall and lanky, the other shorter, with a limp but sharp eyes. They didn't talk, just nodded once at him as they took up their own corners. They hadn't come because they were told to. They came because they'd heard the story. And stories like his, they pull others out of the dark. Later that night, as snow began to fall gently, Tom sat on the bench across from the electronics store. Same spot, same silence. But now, a child pointed him out through a car window and whispered to their mother, "That's him." And the mother didn't pull the child away. She smiled. For once, The city wasn't looking past him. It was looking toward him. The storm came 3 nights later. Not a storm of crime, but snow, thick, white, and relentless. Burnwood froze under its weight. Power lines sagged. Sidewalks disappeared. Cars stood buried like sleeping animals beneath pale blankets. Tom didn't stay inside. Even with the shelter offering warmth and food, he chose to walk the block, carefully, quietly, just as before. Boot prints marked his route. Deliberate, methodical steps down the sleeping heart of the town. He checked doors, windows, alleys, rooftops. His breath came out in clouds. His gloves were frayed at the fingers. But his eyes missed nothing. He passed by Lena's store. The lights inside flickered from generator power. She waved through the window and held up a hot drink. He raised a hand in reply, but didn't enter. He never broke pattern. The route mattered. The order mattered. He turned the corner, reached the bench outside the bakery, paused. Something was there. A box. On top of it, a note. You kept us safe. Let us keep you warm. Inside, new gloves with scarf, thermal socks. A fresh coat. Tom stared at the items, then quietly closed the box and sat beside it. Not because he didn't need them, but because sitting there visible, steady, was what kept the others safe. As snow fell harder, his silhouette became a faint shape under the street lamp. To the unknowing, he might have looked like just another forgotten man. But inside the stores, inside the homes and shelters and patrol cars, people knew this wasn't a man discarded. This was a man who had returned, not to reclaim what he'd lost, but to give what no one else could. A constant, a watcher, a quiet midnight guardian. That night, as the town slept beneath a sky of whitened silence, Tom Reynolds sat steady on the edge of the sidewalk, not waiting for trouble, but ready if it came. And in that stillness, beneath the snow, beneath the night, he became something more than a name in a file. He became a uniform they never saw.